My name is Dorian Hale. I'm 34 years old, and at exactly 7:14 p.m., my mother slapped a sealed envelope out of my hand in front of 43 people. The room went silent. The envelope skidded across the polished floor and stopped beneath a grand piano. My younger brother lunged for it. My father shouted my name, and for the first time in my life, I smiled. Because after 23 years of lies, they were finally terrified of a piece of paper. Not me, not a lawyer, not the police, just a letter. A single letter they never expected me to find. And the moment my mother knocked it from my hand, everyone in that room knew one thing. Whatever was inside it could destroy everything. But to understand why that envelope mattered, you need to understand the kind of family I grew up in. Because from the outside, the Hales looked perfect. Inside, we were built on secrets, and I was the only one who didn't know it. At least, not yet. I grew up in a large house outside Asheville, North Carolina. My father, Conrad Hale, owned a successful construction company. My mother, Vivian, ran every social event, charity dinner, and neighborhood committee she could find. People loved them. They were generous, charming, respected. My younger brother, Camden, was the favorite. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew. Camden could crash a truck into a mailbox and somehow become the victim. I could bring home straight A's and get asked why one grade wasn't higher. That was simply how things worked. When I was 12, I stopped trying to compete. When I was 16, I started saving every dollar I earned. And when I turned 18, I moved out. Not because I hated my family, because I couldn't breathe around them anymore. Every conversation felt like a test. Every achievement felt temporary. Every success somehow became Camden's success too. If I bought a car, my parents bought Camden one. If I got promoted, they found a reason to celebrate him. If I disappeared for a month, nobody noticed. At least, that's what I thought. Because years later, I would learn they noticed everything. They just weren't watching for the reasons I imagined. I built my own life. Started at the bottom, worked warehouse jobs, night shifts, delivery routes, anything that paid. By 28, I owned a small logistics company. Nothing glamorous, just hard work, reliable contracts, long hours. The kind of business built slowly, honestly, without shortcuts. And for the first time, I felt proud. Not rich, not famous, just proud. Then one afternoon, everything changed. It happened during a routine lunch with an elderly client named Graham Whitaker. Graham was 79, sharp as a blade, the kind of man who noticed details other people missed. We were discussing a shipping contract when he suddenly stopped talking. His eyes narrowed. "Dorian?" "Yeah?" "How old are you?" I laughed. 32. He kept staring. Then he asked a strange question. "Have you ever seen your original birth certificate?" I blinked. "What?" "Your original birth certificate." I frowned. "No." Graham leaned back. "Interesting." That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, it became the beginning of everything. Because he wouldn't explain, no matter how many times I asked. He only said one thing before leaving. Some families spend decades protecting secrets. Then he looked directly at me. And some secrets aren't protecting the family at all. I didn't sleep much that night, or the next one, because once someone plants a question in your mind, it grows, and eventually you need answers, even when you're afraid of them. So 3 weeks later, I requested copies of old family records, something I'd never bothered doing before. At first, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed a discrepancy, a tiny one, so small most people would have ignored it. The hospital listed on my birth record wasn't the hospital my mother had always claimed. Different city, different county, different doctor. Maybe an innocent mistake, maybe not. But something felt wrong. And once I started looking, more things stopped making sense. Old photographs disappeared, dates shifted, stories changed. My parents' answers became strangely defensive whenever I asked simple questions. Then my aunt accidentally said something she wasn't supposed to. One sentence, one careless sentence, and suddenly the entire puzzle tilted. "Dorian," she said, "you were always meant to find out eventually." Then her face went white, like she'd accidentally stepped off a cliff. She refused to explain, wouldn't answer calls, wouldn't answer texts, nothing. But now I knew there was definitely something to find. The question was what, and why everyone seemed terrified of it. Over the next year, I became obsessed. Not visibly. I still ran my company, still paid bills, still showed up, but every spare moment went into digging. Records, archives, property documents, old newspaper clippings, anything. And eventually, I found a name that appeared again and again beside my father's, a man named Roland Voss. I had never heard of him, yet somehow he seemed connected to everything. The company, the house, the land, even my childhood. The deeper I looked, the stranger things became. And then came the phone call, the one that changed everything. A woman I had never met contacted me. Her voice shook. "Dorian? Yes? I think I have something that belongs to you." I nearly hung up. It sounded like a scam. Then she said a name nobody outside my family should have known, and my blood turned cold. Because that name had been written inside a notebook I'd discovered 2 days earlier, a notebook hidden in the attic of my parents' old lake cabin. The woman asked to meet. I agreed, against my better judgment. And 48 hours later, she placed a small locked metal box on a cafe table. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she slid it toward me. "Roland told me if anything happened to him, this was for you." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" She looked away. "I think it's the reason your family spent 30 years lying." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted the truth anymore. Because sometimes the mystery feels safer than the answer. Still, I opened the box. Inside were photographs, documents, receipts, letters, and one sealed envelope. The envelope, the same envelope my mother would later knock from my hand, the one that turned an elegant family celebration into a disaster, the one everyone suddenly wanted, the one nobody wanted opened, especially my parents, because hidden inside was a truth that would force every single person in that family to choose a side. And once I read it, there would be no going back, not for them, and not for me. I didn't open the envelope right away. I couldn't. For nearly an hour, I sat alone in my truck, staring at it. The cafe had closed. Rain tapped against the windshield, and the sealed envelope rested on the passenger seat like it weighed 100 pounds. Part of me wanted to tear it open. Another part wanted to throw it into the nearest river and pretend none of this had happened. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. Once it grabs hold of you, it never lets go. Eventually, I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper was yellowed with age. The signature at the bottom read, "Roland Voss." The same man whose name kept appearing throughout my investigation, the same man nobody in my family would talk about. And after reading the first paragraph, my hands started shaking. Because the letter wasn't addressed to my father, it wasn't addressed to my mother, it was addressed to me. If you're reading this, Dorian, then either I am dead, or your family has finally lost control of the truth. I read that sentence 3 times, then kept going. The letter described events that supposedly happened more than 30 decades earlier, events that directly involved my parents, my birth, and a business partnership that ended in betrayal. At first, I thought the man was insane. Then I reached the second page, and found details nobody outside my family should have known. Private details, specific details, things that matched records I had already uncovered. My stomach twisted. The letter claimed that my father and Roland had once owned land together, large amounts of land that would later become worth millions. But according to Roland, ownership documents had mysteriously changed shortly before construction projects began. His name disappeared. My father's remained. Then came lawsuits, threats, broken friendships, and eventually, silence. Yet none of that was what stunned me most. The final page did. Because Roland claimed he hadn't stayed silent all those years for financial reasons. He stayed silent because of me. And according to the letter, I had been the leverage, the pressure point, the reason nobody talked, the reason nobody questioned the past, the reason every conversation suddenly stopped whenever certain topics came up. I stared at those words until the ink blurred. Then I folded the letter, closed the envelope, and sat motionless until sunrise. Because if even half of it was true, my entire life had been built on a lie. Over the next several weeks, I verified everything. Every document, every date, every signature. I wasn't looking for proof that Roland was right. I was looking for proof he was wrong. I desperately wanted him to be wrong. Instead, I found confirmation, again and again and again. Property records matched, court filings matched, tax documents matched. Former employees confirmed pieces of the story. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why? Why would my parents hide all this? What were they protecting? Money? Reputation? Something else? The answer arrived unexpectedly. Through Camden. Ironically, the one person I trusted least.
My brother called me one night, completely out of the blue. He sounded nervous, which immediately put me on edge. "Dorian." "What?" "We need to talk." That was unusual. Camden never wanted serious conversations. Ever. "What happened?" Long silence. Then he said something that made my heart stop. "Mom and Dad know you've been digging." The air left my lungs. "How?" "They've known for months." Months, not days. Months. That meant every family dinner, every birthday, every holiday. They had been watching me, pretending, waiting. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. Camden sighed, then said quietly, "You found Roland, didn't you?" I nearly dropped the phone. That was the moment I realized something important. Camden knew more than he'd ever admitted. Far more. 3 days later, we met at a roadside diner. The place was nearly empty. Camden looked exhausted, older than I remembered. For once, he wasn't acting confident, or spoiled, or entitled. He looked scared, and that frightened me more than anything. "What do you know?" I asked. He stared into his coffee, then laughed bitterly. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "You spent your whole life thinking I was the favorite." I frowned. "Because you were." "No." He shook his head. "You were the problem." I felt ice crawl up my spine. "What does that mean?" He looked at me. Really looked at me. Then he said the last thing I expected. "Dad never worried about you." "What?" "He worried about you." The diner suddenly felt very small. Camden rubbed his face. "I heard them arguing when I was a kid." "What kind of arguing?" "The kind people do when they think nobody is listening." My pulse hammered. "And?" He swallowed. "Every fight was about you." That conversation changed everything. Because for the first time, I began viewing my childhood differently.
The favoritism, the distance, the constant criticism. What if it wasn't what I'd always assumed? What if there was another reason? Not love, not hate. Fear. The possibility hit me so hard I couldn't think straight. And once the idea appeared, I saw evidence everywhere. Mom watching me too closely. Dad overreacting whenever I asked questions. Relatives changing subjects. Old friends going silent. Suddenly, everything looked different. Then came the invitation, a formal invitation. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary, a massive celebration. Dozens of guests, business partners, friends, family. Everyone would be there, including me. At first, I planned not to go. Then I realized something. This might be my only chance. One room, one night, every person connected to the secret gathered together. If answers existed, they'd be there. So I accepted, and I brought the envelope. The same envelope now resting in my desk drawer. The one Roland left behind. The one containing the final piece of the puzzle. Because despite everything I'd discovered, I still hadn't uncovered the biggest truth. The truth Roland hinted at, but never fully explained. The truth buried beneath decades of lies. The truth my parents feared more than lawsuits, more than scandal, more than losing money. I arrived at the anniversary party carrying that envelope inside my jacket, and the moment my mother saw it, all the color drained from her face. Not because she recognized me, because she recognized it, the envelope. She knew exactly what it was, and that terrified her. For the next 2 hours, she barely left my side, watching, waiting, listening. My father did the same. Neither of them smiled much. Neither relaxed.
It was as if a bomb had been placed in the middle of the ballroom, and only they knew it was ticking. Finally, near the end of the evening, I decided I'd had enough. I walked toward the stage, toward the microphone, toward the answers, and I pulled out the envelope. The room began to quiet. People noticed. Conversation stopped. My father's face went white. Camden stood abruptly. My mother started moving toward me, fast, very fast. I held up the envelope and said 7 words. 7 words that changed everything. Someone here owes me the truth. The room froze. Then my mother struck the envelope from my hand, exactly as I told you at the beginning. It slid across the floor. Guests gasped. My brother ran toward it. My father shouted. And suddenly decades of secrets were no longer hiding in the shadows, because whether my family liked it or not, the truth was finally coming out. And when that envelope opened, everyone's life was about to change.
The envelope stopped beneath the grand piano. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 43 guests stood frozen in stunned silence. My mother looked like she couldn't breathe. My father looked ready to collapse, and Camden was halfway across the room, staring at the envelope as if it were a loaded weapon. For years, I'd wondered what secret could make my family act the way they did. Now, I was about to find out. Camden reached the envelope first. For one terrifying second, I thought he was going to destroy it. Instead, he picked it up, slowly, carefully. Then he looked at our parents. Enough. His voice echoed through the ballroom. Nobody had ever spoken to them like that. Not publicly. Not ever. My father stepped forward. Give me that. No. Camden. No. The room became even quieter. Then my brother did something I never expected. He walked directly toward me and handed me the envelope. The same brother I'd spent my entire life resenting. The same brother I'd blamed for everything. The same brother who had always seemed to benefit whenever I lost. He looked me straight in the eyes and said quietly, "You deserve to know." My mother's knees nearly buckled. "Please," she whispered. The single word shocked me more than anything else, because my mother never pleaded. She controlled situations, managed them, directed them. But now she looked terrified. "Please don't do this here." I stared at her. "Then tell me the truth." Tears filled her eyes. My father stepped beside her. His face looked 20 years older than it had an hour earlier. Guests shifted nervously. Nobody was leaving. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. After all, they'd watched Conrad Hale become one of the most respected businessmen in the county. Now they were watching him unravel. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a folded legal document, a handwritten letter, and a photograph. Not a family photograph, an aerial survey map. Hundreds of acres marked in red. My stomach tightened, because I recognized the land immediately. Everyone in the county did. The Ridgecrest development. Luxury homes, commercial centers, industrial warehouses. Millions upon millions of dollars in real estate. The very project that had transformed my father's company from local contractor to regional powerhouse. The project tied to Roland Voss. The project tied to every missing record, every lawsuit, every secret, every dead end. My hands began shaking. I unfolded the legal document, and suddenly, the room felt too small. The document was a trust agreement. The original, not a copy, not a draft, the original, signed 31 years earlier by Roland Voss and witnessed by 2 attorneys. At first, I couldn't understand what I was reading. Then, I reached the highlighted section, and my heart nearly stopped, because Roland hadn't simply owned part of the land, he'd owned most of it, 51%, a controlling interest, the majority stake. And according to the trust document, that ownership had never been sold, never transferred, never surrendered. It had been placed into a protected trust for one beneficiary, one future beneficiary, one person. Me, Dorian Hale. A gasp spread through the room. Several guests stepped closer. Others looked at my father. Nobody understood what they were hearing. I barely understood it myself. I looked up. My father had gone completely pale. Not angry, not defensive, defeated, as if he'd spent decades waiting for this exact moment. "What is this?" My voice sounded distant. Nobody answered. I looked again, then saw the final page, a page attached years later, a court filing, never submitted, never finalized, never seen. It described an agreement, a private settlement, one that had been hidden from everyone, including me, especially me. And suddenly, everything clicked. Roland and Conrad hadn't simply had a business dispute, they'd had a war, a brutal one, one that threatened to destroy both families. According to the documents, Roland had discovered financial irregularities during the early development of Ridgecrest. Projects were being approved faster than regulations allowed. Investors were being promised things that didn't yet exist. Loans were being secured against future values. Nothing outright criminal, but risky, dangerously risky. The 2 men fought, then fought harder, then stopped being friends entirely. Lawsuits followed, threats followed, and eventually a private settlement was negotiated, a settlement nobody knew existed until now. My hands trembled as I read Roland's letter. The room waited, every eye locked on me. I read aloud, "If this letter reaches you, Dorian, then the agreement has failed. Conrad was never supposed to keep this from you forever. He promised that when you were old enough, the truth would be explained. The land was placed into trust because I no longer trusted either side to act without emotion. You were the only person neither of us wanted to punish. The ownership was protected for you because you had done nothing wrong. One day the decision would be yours. I lowered the letter. Silence. Absolute silence. Then I looked directly at my father. What decision? Conrad closed his eyes. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Then finally he answered. The land. My chest tightened. What about it? His voice broke. It's yours. The room exploded. People started talking all at once, questions, whispers, shock, disbelief. But I barely heard any of it, because all I could think about was one thing. 30 years. 30 years of secrets. 30 years of fear. 30 years of watching me, monitoring me, protecting information from me. Not because I was unwanted, because I was the key to everything. I turned to my father. You knew? He nodded. Always. Mom knew? Another nod. I looked at Vivian. Tears streamed down her face. We thought we were protecting you. The words hit me like a punch, because suddenly my entire childhood looked different. The distance, the monitoring, the strange overreactions, the endless warnings about business, the way every question made them nervous, the way relatives changed subjects, the way my father watched me whenever land or property came up. Not because they feared what would happen after I discovered, because they feared what would happen after. Why treat me differently? I asked. My voice cracked. If this was supposed to be mine, why make me feel like an outsider? That question shattered both of them. My mother's face crumpled immediately, but it was my father who answered. Because I was ashamed. The room went silent again. Conrad looked older than I had ever seen him. Not powerful, not respected. Just tired. Profoundly tired. I should have told you. His voice shook. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because every year it became harder. A tear rolled down his cheek. I thought if I waited until the lawsuits ended, I'd tell you. Pause. Then I thought I'd tell you after the investors were gone. Pause. Then after the company stabilized. Pause. Then after the trust expired. His voice cracked completely. And eventually I realized I wasn't protecting you anymore. Silence. I was protecting myself. Nobody spoke, because everyone understood the difference. My mother stepped forward. I was afraid too. She wiped her eyes. If people found out, they'd come after you. Who? The investors, the lawyers, the former partners, the people who believed they were owed something. She shook her head. We thought keeping you away from it would give you a normal life. I laughed. A sad laugh. The kind that hurts. A normal life? Nobody answered, because we all knew I hadn't had one. Then Camden spoke, for the first time that night. You want to know the truth? I looked at him. He nodded toward our parents. They weren't protecting the land. Everyone turned toward him. They were protecting each other. The room grew still. Camden swallowed. Dad never wanted the land. I frowned. What? He tried giving it back. The room erupted again. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Camden looked exhausted. The settlement gave Roland two options. My pulse hammered. Either sell everything and destroy the company, or place it in trust until someone neutral could decide. I looked down at the documents. Suddenly everything made sense. The trust, the secrecy, the fear, the waiting. You. Camden pointed at me. That neutral person was always you. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then something unexpected happened. I looked at my father. really looked at him, not as the man who disappointed me, not as the man who hid the truth, just as a human being, a flawed one, a scared one, a man who made terrible decisions and then spent decades trapped inside them. And for the first time, I understood him. Not completely, but enough.
"Why didn't you trust me?" I asked quietly. Conrad's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't trust myself." That answer hurt more than anything else, because it was honest, finally honest. The aftermath wasn't clean. There were attorneys, meetings, audits, years of paperwork. The trust was legitimate. The ownership was legitimate. Everything Roland had written was true. In the end, I made the decision both men had failed to make. I sold a portion, preserved a portion, created scholarships, protected employees, settled old disputes, and closed a chapter that had poisoned 2 families for 3 decades. Not perfectly, but fairly. A year later, I visited the old Ridgecrest Overlook, the highest point on the property, the same land that had caused so much damage, so much fear, so much silence. My father joined me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he handed me something, a photograph. Roland, Conrad, and Vivian, young, laughing, before everything fell apart. "I miss him," Conrad said quietly. I looked at him. "What?" "Roland." His voice cracked. "He was my best friend." The wind moved through the trees, and suddenly I realized something. The real tragedy wasn't the land, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the trust. It was that pride had stolen 30 years from everyone. My father stared across the valley. "I wish I'd told you sooner." I nodded. "So do I." Neither of us looked away. People ask whether discovering the truth changed my life. It did, but not because of the money, not because of the land, not because of the ownership. The truth changed my life because it answered the question I'd carried since childhood. Why did everything feel wrong? Now I knew. The adults around me had been living inside a secret they were too afraid to face, and that fear shaped all of us. The truth didn't destroy my family. The silence nearly did. The truth finally gave us a chance to rebuild, and after 30 years of running from it, that was worth more than any piece of land could ever be. If you enjoyed Dorian's story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in his position? Would you have opened the envelope and uncovered the truth, or left the past buried forever? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy powerful family drama stories filled with secrets, betrayal, and emotional twists, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.